Greetings, everybody. I wanted to go over chapter 15 again, and just so you'll have this video to refer to. So let's dive right in. I'm going to record, obviously I'm going to record the session so you can see this. So let's share our screen out, okay? And we're going to share our screen. And first thing we're going to talk about is store procs. And store procs are very powerful. I've used them a lot in my career. They are a programmatic way of running multiple commands. And the cool thing about store procs is that you can execute them from a query window, but you can also schedule them and execute them even when you're not around. So it's very good. A store proc can receive input parameters and can return output parameters, and we'll take a look at that. Also, this is a very powerful way of preventing hackers from hacking into your code. It provides a great way for security. You can even make security within SQL that will only allow certain users to run them. It's a great way for avoiding SQL injection. So let's go ahead and let's create a store proc and let's talk a little bit about that, okay? And obviously you can always take a look at your notes, and this shows you different ways of passing parameters. So let's jump right into SQL. So let's say we want to create, we're going to create a store proc. In this case, we're going to create a store proc called SP vendor invoice report. I just dropped it after I tested it. So let's just go ahead and do this. But first, let's take a look at the select statement. So the select statement is something where we're doing joins. Remember, we'll probably still have to do joins, but we can also programmatically pass parameters to this by using it as a store proc. But let's try running it first. If we just run it like this, it's going to return a bunch of rows. Notice how we're highlighting only the select statement here. So these are all vendors that we still owe money to, okay? And maybe we only want to see the highest one. So maybe 400 is what we're looking for, is our parameter. We could take a look at only people we owe 400 or more to, okay? And let's say we only wanted to see vendors that were that start with M, okay? So we could do M. We'll just comment out this variable, and this will narrow it down to 2 rows. Now we can do all the same things with a store proc. And the cool thing is it becomes an object in your database, a compiled object, which makes it faster than just running it like this, because it's going to have some type of optimization plan that SQL puts in with it. But we're going to leave it with these parameters. And then we're going to just execute and create this store proc, okay? And notice how right here, I've actually given them default values. You don't have to, but this way your store proc will always run. So let's go ahead and execute this. So what? Oh, I got a comma here. So, and notice how I got this command right here. This will actually be part of the store proc, even though when the execute won't run. But sometimes I like to have these in my code so I know how to actually execute these store procs. So let's go ahead and create it. And it is now out there, and this is one of the ways that we can run it. We can execute this without the sending parameters, or we can execute it with sending parameters. Okay, and I just want you to note that you can also run it through your GUI, Microsoft Management Studio, SQL Server, Microsoft Management SQL Studio. I probably said that wrong. Anyway, you can run it here if you wanted to. So you could say total is 400, and then we can do all the M's, and it should return the same data set. Okay. All right. Now let's say we wanted to add an output variable to this. So what we can do is we can add this output variable to our store proc. Okay. And of course, whenever we modify an object in our database, we use the alter command. Okay, so we're going to alter this. And let's say we want to assign a value to be returned from our store proc. Well, we can do that. And we will simply, and in this case, what we're attempting to do in our store proc is not only return who do we still owe money to, but what is the sum of that money that we owe. Okay. And so we've added this statement in here. We created an output variable, a parameter, and we're going to assign it the sum of the total of all the invoices that we still owe, using the same exact parameters that we originally did. So let's go ahead and modify the store proc. We got it. And now to run it, okay, let's get rid of some of this stuff. To run it, we have to declare a variable, and then we're going to execute that. We're going to populate that variable by passing it as a parameter. Notice you got to tell it that it's an output parameter, and then we can even do a select on that. So we actually have two select statements that are going to run here. Okay, let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. We get 2 rows, and then we get the total of this column right here. So that's a way to do a store proc with an output parameter. Refer to your notes if you have any further questions. Let me close this window down. All right. So let's go back to our notes. Again, you could throw certain errors in your store proc. These are valuable programmatically as you're using another language such as Python or VB.NET, ASP.NET, C#, C++. You can actually return these values if something goes wrong. Okay. For example, in this case, it's where vendor ID is not in our vendors table. All right. So we're not going, that won't be on the test. You can execute a store procedure from another store procedure. Okay. You can loop, you can try, you can catch errors. You can do all these fun things. We're not going to go over these, but the system SQL actually has its own store procedures that's created for you. Okay. And you could try some of these too. And in some cases, you need to pass parameters, like in SP columns, you need to pass the table that you want to see the columns for. Makes sense, right? Um, so anyways, yeah. So that's next thing we're going to talk about are scalar functions. What scalar function mean is that it returns one value. So we've seen some of the functions that SQL has, and they're very powerful, but we can create our own functions. And I did just that. So let's go to our let's go to one function I've already drop it so we can recreate it. Again, create, alter, drop. Those are the three things you can do with your data objects. Okay, let's go drop it in case I've already added it. Now we're going to create a function. Then we're going to look at how to use it. Okay. For example, let's say, again, let's say I just want a function to return my total sum of the things I owe. Okay. And this time we're going to look at only vendors by a certain vendor name. We're doing the same joins. We want to see what we owe a certain vendor. And we're going to pass it a parameter, and we're going to return a variable, in this case, total sum. Now, it could only be one value. If, for example, I didn't use sum here, it would return a bunch of rows. Instead of scalar means one value, we only want to return one value. So let's go ahead and create this, and then we're going to look at how we can use something like that. Okay, so I've created that function. Okay, I'm also going to create another function. In this case, I want to return vendor ID. Okay, I want to return vendor ID by passing it a vendor name. Okay, so the idea is that I don't know what the vendor ID is, but I know I have a vendor called US Postal Service. So let's go ahead and try that. Okay, let's go ahead and try that. Oh, I got to drop it first. So let's drop it. I've already created it. By the way, you can make this an if statement. If it is out there, then you create it. If it's not, then you alter it. We could do that if we wanted to. All right. So the way to use something like this is you can, I can put in a vendor name. I know this is a valid vendor name. Okay. And if I run this, it's going to give me the vendor ID for that vendor name. Let's go ahead and run this. All right. Pretty cool, right? Now, I also create this other function, right? Function total sum. And in this case, I'm also passing it a vendor name. So I can do this thing twice, okay? And I can get the sum for that vendor also at the same time. I could also have made this a vendor ID if I wanted to, okay? But I made it vendor name. So let's go ahead and let's also use this function in our query. So how we do that, we just copy it. And again, we're going to pretty much do the same thing we did here, okay? Where we pass it the vendor name, okay? And so let's go ahead and do that. And by the way, you have to put DBO, this is a schema name, before your functions. I'm not sure why they do that, but they do it anyway, so we got to do it. Okay, and let's go ahead and just copy this. Let's see if it'll work. Okay, and this time it's going to be, we'll just call it total. Okay, so, and if we run it with both functions, it should work just fine. Okay, that just means that that vendor doesn't have anything in their invoices. Okay, and unfortunately, I could probably do it for multiple ones. Let's see if we can quickly look and see if there's a vendor out there that we do owe money to. Okay. Oh, by the way, I could just run my store product, so I don't even need this. Let's see what we get here. Okay. Right away, it's going to try to tell you which ones you have. And it's going to default to 0, so we're going to just run it like this. Okay. We don't even have to do anything. Okay, so who do we owe money? It's like Blue Cross. There's a lot of rows in here. We owe, I could add these up, but it's going to be greater than the lowest one of these. So it's going to, looks like it's going to be about, I don't know, $600 or so. So let's go ahead and put in Blue Cross here. I could put that in as a variable. But we won't, just for the sake of time. And the value of making this, declaring a variable here is obvious. You only have to change this one time. Okay. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. And yeah, it's I don't know why it's only 179. I have to take a look at. Oh, it's because I'm not exactly sure, but it's only reporting on one of these. Oh, because I only returned the first vendor ID. Okay, got it. I could, if I ran this by itself, okay. Let's go ahead and make another statement. Select statement here. We could just find out the total if we wanted. Oh, it's because I'm looking at invoices. So we have to look at. Let's see what happens here. I blow up. Let's see what we get now. Just out of curiosity. I'll get to gives them all. Okay. Anyways, I'm not going to waste too much time with this. Okay. But I just wanted to show you how you can run your functions within a SQL statement. Okay. And we could do the same thing for any of these. All right. So let's close that down. Let's move back to our notes. All right. And we'll close that down too. All right. So anyways, you can look at your notes of how to create this. The last thing we need to talk about is triggers. And we're going to do just a very simple trigger here. We're going to create a trigger on our BAA invoices table, okay? And we're going to insert roles, and we can also modify roles. And I'm going to tell you how that works. But basically, we're going to create a trigger. What is a trigger? A trigger really is a special type of stored proc that fires runs after, in this case, an insert and an update. You can also put delete in here. So you can do certain things anytime something happens to this table, the vendor's table, okay? In this case, they are changing the date, or they're setting the date to all uppercase. Okay, cool. So it happens, it's event driven. In other words, after we insert a row, after we update a row, after we delete a row, this little store proc is going to fire. It's a specialized store proc. You can't pass parameters to it. It does have one big parameter, and that's inserted. Basically, that means, or deleted. Basically, it means that is a table in a row that is being affected on an insert. Okay, so it will return one row, and we notice that here. Okay, in this case, it's going to return all the rows that were inserted. And since it only inserts one row at a time, it's only going to be one row. Okay. Even when you run multiple insert statements, it's like it will go through each row one at a time and return, in this case, the vendor ID. So let's go ahead and create a trigger on my table, my BAA invoices table. Again, I think I've already created this, so let's just go ahead and drop it. We're dropping this object. Okay. Notice that the syntax is always the same. Okay, now we're going to create it. But first, the first thing I want to do is I want to delete all the rows that I've already added to BAA invoices. Okay, so if I did a select, let's go ahead and delete them first. Again, this is a very powerful command, so you have to remember when you delete everything, it's going to delete everything. Okay. Yes, we can set up batches to only recreate those batches, recall those batches that we didn't want to do this to. But we're not going to go over that in the class. So now if I did a select asterisk from it, that table, you'll see that there is no rows left. Okay. So I'm going to create a trigger. This trigger is going to be created after an insert and after an update. You got to understand that after an update, it will try to fire after you update this also. So you have to be careful about that when you're updating the same table that you're firing the trigger on. Okay, but we're going to go ahead and try it. So the protocol is usually to call by the table's name and then put in when this trigger is going to fire. In this case, after an insert and after an update. Okay. Now, before we run this, let's go ahead. Let's insert some rows in here. Okay. So we've inserted some rows. And if we go back and we do a select on that, notice it's inserted these rows, but I've added a couple, 4 columns to this invoice table: insert user ID, insert date, modify user ID, modify date. So once we create this trigger, okay, watch what happens. By the way, of course, the invoice ID automatically adds. And since we had 3 rows in there, started at 4. So let's go ahead and create this. Now let's try adding those same 3 rows using the insert statement. Ooh, got a little problem there. What's the problem? Is that this update is trying to modify accordingly. So we got a little bit of a problem. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to alter this table, this trigger, okay? And this time we're going to only fire it after we do an insert, okay? Let's go ahead and run that again. No problem. Now let's try running these. Okay, so it inserted these 3 rows. Let's see what it looks like now. And what you're going to notice, is you're going to notice that the 3 rows we inserted first didn't have these modified, but now the 3 rows we inserted next do have these 4 fields updated with my user ID and the current date time. Very powerful. So again, you got to be careful about this. We really should be modifying, updating a table other than invoices, because we're trying to run a trigger on that's going to affect the same table. And that's why we can't do it on an update. Okay. So this is a real basic way to create a trigger. We may go over that a little bit. I don't think it'll be on the test, but I just wanted to show you how to do that. Going back to our notes, we're really at the end of the rollback. You can create a batch transaction, and then you can roll back the transaction if it doesn't do what you want it to do. Okay, that won't be on the test. And this, of course, the alter trigger modifies that trigger. Okay, so go ahead, feel free to try this out. There are some issues when you try to create a trigger on an update with the same table, because you are updating the table and it's going to call that trigger again. So you have to be careful about that. So that's chapter 15 in a nutshell. I hope it was helpful to you. Again, I'll be signing out another video to show you how to do assignment number 6. So that's all I have for today. Talk to you later. So long.